Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game, also from the Niksic tournament of 1983. We have sort of a generation, not sort of, it really is a generational clash between Bent Larsen and Garry Kasparov. The great Dane facing the beast with 1,000 eyes. As you know, Kasparov is preparing for his World Chess Championship match that will take place in 1984 against none other than Anatoly Karpov. And something that I especially enjoy in 1983, we would call this a modern player versus someone from the previous generation, is that I think Kasparov and Karpov would give anything to be able to play Bobby Fischer at some point in their lives, ever since he stopped playing from 1972, then maybe during the time between the sort of a rematch with Boris Spassky in 1992. Basically, at any point, I believe they would love to have a chance of playing against Bobby Fischer. Since that was not possible and Bobby would not play, he was, like I said, invited to this tournament, but he just asked for too much money, $30,000 for that time. That was too much. Playing against someone who actually faced Bobby Fischer over the course of, let's say, 15 years, like Bent Larsen, is the second best thing. And not only that, Larsen does have some victories against Bobby Fischer. They've played 14 games altogether. Larsen defeated Fischer twice. It was first time in the second Piatigorsky Cup of 1966. We've covered the entire tournament. And okay, Fischer did have a shaky start. First half of the tournament was really bad, but then he just obliterated everyone in the second half. Almost caught up to Spassky in the end. It was Spassky first place, Fischer second place. If you haven't seen that, check out my playlist on the second Piatigorsky Cup. Will be the first link in the description below. And also, he faced Bobby Fischer during his sort of legendary or the godlike run of the 1972 Palma de Mallorca, and then in the candidates, and then basically those 3 years are where Fischer was just unstoppable. Bent Larsen is one of those players who defeated him in the Palma de Mallorca interzonal. So that is definitely something. And even though it's only 2 of 14 games, and okay, we all know how the 1971 candidates match against Fischer went for Larsen, still an impressive result. I think anyone would, like to boast with. So you can play Fischer, but you can play someone who faced Fischer many times. Of course, it's not that Larsen, as that Larsen was much younger. This Larsen is now 48 years old, playing against Kasparov here, and Kasparov is 20, so the age difference is, certainly a lot. But yeah, if you haven't, seen any of those tournaments, or if you haven't seen the Bobby Fischer saga, do check that out as well. So now let's see what Kasparov can do. And Kasparov already has one draw against Larsen. The first game they ever played ended in a draw in Tilsburg, I think, in 1981. So he definitely doesn't want to lose, because he knows that some 20, 30, 40, 50 years from this point in time, people will say, well, how is Kasparov the greatest of all time, if he lost the 48-year-old Larsen, and Fischer, just completely obliterated him, don't be silly. So I think it added at least some sort of an extra incentive. I don't think Kasparov actually needed an extra incentive, because he played every game to win. As does every world champion, but still, I guess it helped a little. So okay, let's see what happened. Larsen with white opens with pawn to c4. We have pawn to e6 and knight to c3. Okay, we have pawn to d5 by Kasparov, pawn to d4, and pawn to c5. Again, Kasparov goes for his Tarrasch defense, and he was very adamant about this until his. Until the actual World Chess Championship match against Karpov, and then Karpov showed why it's maybe not the best thing to play at the very top level. We have c captures on d5, e captures on d5, knight f3, we have knight to c6, and pawn to g3. The Rubinstein system of the Tarrasch defense, knight to f6 and bishop to g2. We have bishop to e7, castles, and pawn to b3. Preparing to fianchetto the dark square bishop as well. Knight to e4, Kasparov lands a knight and says, all right, you can capture, then we get some sort of an active position, or, you just continue development, and then I continue development. That's exactly what Bent does. Bishop to b2, we have bishop to f6 and knight to a4. Looks a little bit odd, but you are looking to trade those dark square bishops. And, you could continue with something like b6, rook to e8. Even today, rook to e8 and b6 are the top two replies for black here, as this line is still very much played today. We have rook to c1, pawn to b6 and d captures on c5. We have bishop captures on b2, knight captures and b captures on c5, knight back to a4, putting pressure on that c5 pawn, and bishop to a6. Asking, are you maybe interested in a nice pawn on c5? But if you capture the pawn on c5, then after knight captures and the rook captures, of course, bishop captures on e2, and you have problems. So rook to e1, and now pawn to c4. So all been played before, nothing new here. Usually, you could even play something like b captures, bishop captures. That's perfectly fine, leaving black with this isolated d pawn. Or more often than not, as this is, like I said, still played nowadays, there are many games in the database where after this c4 move, white just goes knight to d2. And now everything is pressured. c4 is pressured, knight is pressured. Usually will continue with something like queen f6, knight captures on e4, d captures on e4, b captures on c4. And now you can see that white is up a pawn. But it goes further. For example, rook 8 to d8, going after the white queen, queen to b3, and now even pawn to e3. You can sacrifice another pawn, capture something like queen h6, putting pressure on e3, and black will have a very fierce attack for the price of 2 pawns. The position is equal, but black has very active play, which is, I imagine, what Kasparov was hoping for. But Bent had a little surprise for Kasparov. He played knight to h4, which has never been played before, and after this game hasn't been played since. So it is a unique move for this line that is very popular, and for chess history, I would say, itself. And it is now, as of move 17, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Kasparov responds. Kasparov goes queen to a5. Now, the knight here, of course, the knight wants to come to f5 and remain there for as long as possible. And if you kick it away, the knight will be remaneuvered to d4, where it will be incredibly active. Okay, Kasparov goes queen to a5, developing the queen, preparing to bring the rook into the game, and putting some pressure on that rook on e1. So really playing using the entire board. Knight to f5 by Bent. We have pawn to g6 and knight to d4. Centralizing the knight, offering a trade. And Kasparov says, sure, let's trade, but if you want to trade, we're going to trade on c6. So, okay, Bent goes pawn to h4. He wants to attack Kasparov's king side, and knight to e5. And here Kasparov sets a beautiful trap. The idea is that should Bent continue with pawn to h5, do you see what Kasparov had in mind? It's actually very tricky. Here, Kasparov was planning knight captures on f2. And that's just game over. If king captures on f2, knight to g4 check. Now you cannot go to f1 because knight to e3 check will pick up the queen. So you can play king to g1, but still, look at this, knight e3 and the queen is trapped. It's one of the silliest queen traps I've seen in a while. The queen does not have d3, the knight covers c2, and the queen covers d2. That's just, I mean, wow. So that's the idea. Of course, Bent realizes this, plays bishop to h3. It is by far the best move, controls the g4 square, and Kasparov goes rook to c7, as also his rook on c8 was attacked. And here you should continue with queen to c2, but Bent continues with knight to c2. And it's easy to, you know, comment now in 2025 and to laugh at all games, and you're like, okay, well, judging everyone with the 4,000 rated engine behind you, but it's not, maybe it's not that simple. So Kasparov is completely winning here, but what did he miss? So what would you play here? That is the question. Have at it while I give you a couple of seconds. So Kasparov had a really powerful move here, and that is knight to d3. And there just doesn't seem to be a move that you can play that gets you out of this. You're losing the exchange, and that's it. And if knight is captured, then the idea is c captures on d3, and okay, you're gonna win the knight back. Or after knight to e3, you're just gonna play rook captures on c1, queen captures and d2, and that is just game over for white. Maybe he thought that after knight to d3 there was some potential counterplay with pawn to b4, as there often is, but still you're just gonna capture on a4, and then after e captures on d3, c captures on d3 again. It's nicely defended. Not much you can do here. For example, knight d4, you can trade queens, queen captures, c captures on d1, and you have this beautiful pawn on d3. it's hard to say what he disliked about this. But okay, after knight to c2, Kasparov played c captures on b3. He did not go for this knight to d3 move, which I'm sure all of you found. If you haven't, then maybe it is very difficult. And also one thing that we don't know, how much time did Bent have on the clock? Maybe he was already in time trouble, and maybe Kasparov was just pressuring him to play moves. Who knows? Or maybe Kasparov was in time trouble. I doubt it, but you never know. So c captures, we have a captures on b3 and bishop to c8. Putting pressure on that h3 bishop, saying that, okay, we're going to trade, and then I'm getting my knight to g4. Bent, again, defends most properly bishop to g2, and Kasparov goes knight to g4, sort of inviting pawn to f3, but pawn to f3 wouldn't really do all that much. You're just going to play knight f2 with an attack on the queen, and once the queen moves, you're going to play rook captures on c2. And now you see the power of Kasparov's queen on a5. If you capture the rook, then queen captures on e1. So you're going to have to play f captures on e4, and then just knight captures on e4, and after, let's say, bishop captures, rook captures, you attack the queen, queen f2, as you have to guard that rook, let's say captures, you get something like bishop to f5, and white's position is just terrible. The white king is wide in the open, the black pieces are coming, black also up a pawn, so, that'd be very nice. Larsen, of course, did not go for that. He played rook to f1, which is the best move and one that still holds the position together. We have bishop to d7 by Kasparov, and now rook back to a1, just defending that knight. We have bishop captures on a4, rook captures on a4, and queen to c3, putting pressure on the knight on c2. But now Bent just goes bishop captures on e4, d captures on e4, and pawn to e3. And he says, all right, you can capture, I'm going to capture on g4. And all of a sudden, Kasparov isn't that much better. He's a little better. He's not much better. Queen captures on b3. Rook captures on e4, saying, okay, you can capture on c2, but your rook is hanging. And if rook captures on e4, which was played in the game, then Bent goes a queen to d8 with check, king to g7, and queen captures on c7, defending the knight. Kasparov counters with rook to c4, now threatening to win a piece, but Bent counters with knight to c4, saying, okay, you capture my queen, I'm going to capture your queen. And that is exactly what Kasparov goes for. Rook captures on c5, on c7, knight captures on b3, and rook to c2, fully activating the rook, and the material is completely equal. Kasparov does have a passed a pawn, so we definitely prefer black here. We have knight to d4, attacking the rook, rook to a2, and now pawn to e4. Preparing to further advance with pawn to f4, pawn to e5, rook to d2, attacking the knight, knight to c6, and pawn to a6. Kasparov, of course, defends the pawn. Pawn to e5, the pawn is nicely defended here. And if you go for something like rook to c2, attacking the knight, then just knight b4. You are, of course, happy to trade this pawn for this pawn, and now you will do exactly that. So after e5, rook to e2, putting more pressure on the pawn, and now rook to a1, saying, okay, let's trade. I mean, that's would definitely go a long way for Bent to draw this game if you eliminate the passed a pawn. But rook captures on f2 by Kasparov. We have rook captures on a6, and now rook back to c2. Attacking the knight, we have pawn to h5. Pawn to h5, attacking the black king. And while, okay, you've eliminated the passed a pawn, it's still not clear. We have king to h6, and now h captures, and rook to a4, putting pressure on the knight on g4. King g5, Kasparov winning more space here. He's hoping to get that king somehow all the way to g3, and then maybe somehow checkmate Bent's king on g1. We have knight to d4, attacking the rook, rook to c3, putting pressure on the g3 pawn, and now pawn to e6. Here, Bent is saying, okay, if you want, you can capture my pawn on g3, but will you be in time to stop my pawn? Kasparov says, yes, I will. Rook captures on g3 with check, king to h1, and now pawn to f5. Now Kasparov is ready to start marching his f-pawn down the board, pawn to e7. Preparing to queen, very, very close to queening, and here we have rook to e3. Of course, putting the rook behind the passed pawn, knight to c6, Bent to defense, and pawn to f4. Kasparov continues pushing forward, rook to a5 check, we have king to h4, and now rook to a8, getting another defender of the e8 square, so preparing to queen and win Kasparov's rook after Kasparov gives it up for the newly promoted queen. And here we have knight to f6. Okay, Kasparov is defending that once again, so no problem there. And here the problem is, well, I often like to mention this, but analyzing games with an engine, you will see a position like this, and you will see the engine say, okay, the position is 0-0. But not all equal positions are equal. There are some positions where any move you make, let's say the first 15 moves you think of, it's still an equal position. And then you have positions like these where only one move keeps the equilibrium. Otherwise, you're just dead lost. So while, yes, this is an equal position, it's not as equal as some equal positions are. And, you know, there should also be sort of in the old days, they called this the critical position. And then you immediately knew that, okay, now if you make the tiniest of mistakes, you know, your entire position just falls apart. So that is what Bent has to do here. There is only one move that keeps him in the game, and not the first one that comes to mind. Even when I tell you the move, you're not going to understand why. But I will show it. So have at it. You know, improve your day. Hold this against Kasparov. So for those of you who were able to do this, you should, you know, be playing in the next Tata Steel Masters edition because you are a Grandmaster level. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, the move is King to H2. Bent played King to G2, which makes more sense. You want to be closer to the passed pawn, but yeah, that was a crucial tempo. I will show you why, and I mean, it's just disgusting. If you go King H2 and Kasparov starts advancing, because that pawn is the way Kasparov plans to win the game, of course, Bent will bring a queen into the game, and Kasparov will have to give up a knight. Knight captures on E8, and now you don't capture, of course, because it makes no sense. You go Rook A4 check, and after King to H5, you go King to G3, and now after pawn to G5, you go King to F2. You attack the rook. Rook to E6 moves, attacking the knight, and now Knight D4. You attack the rook and the F3 pawn, and after Rook to F6, seemingly defending everything, and you're just preparing G4, King to H4, and G3 to win the game, Knight captures on F3. And that is the only way to hold this. Incredible, but it's true. Pawn to G4, you're going to lose that knight, but it doesn't matter. Rook to A5 check, and the knight does not allow the king any closer. King H6, you just repeat, Rook to A3. And then if the king again tries to go forward, you check the king. And if knight to D6, black tries to get the knight into the game via check, you just unpin. King to G3, now you want to capture on G4, and black has nothing better than to capture, where you will very happily trade. Rook captures, and this is a draw, very easy one to hold, at classical time control at least. So yeah, you have to see that in order to play King to H2. But King to G2 is just so much more natural. You're already closer to the passed pawn. So that is what Bent played. But now Kasparov is completely winning. And of course, the first move is the move everyone plays as it comes with check. So we're not going to make this the pause the video moment. Rather, after King to F1 and King to G3, there is this very nice move, knight to knight to D4. And okay, what do you play here? There is one way that you can, you know, push for a win, and there is one move that wins the game on the spot. So that is the question. What do you play here with black? While I give you a couple of seconds, make it count. So of course, I mean, you cannot capture the pawn if that's what you're wondering. The move is knight to G4. And it seems like, why would you do this if white will just bring a queen into the game? Well, if you do this, then knight H2 check, and after king to G1, F2 check comes with tempo, king H1, and F1 rook or queen will be checkmate. So that is what Kasparov played, of course. So you cannot win the rook, but you can play knight captures on F3, which was played in the game. Rook captures on F3, and now king to G1. If you go king to E1, then just rook E3 check will pick up the pawn. So after rook captures on f3, king to g1 was played, and now Kasparov plays the main idea, and that is knight to h2, allowing Bent to bring a queen into the game, but it doesn't matter as a rook to f1 will be checkmate. So of course you cannot do that, and if you go rook to a1, still doesn't help you. You're just going to go rook to e3, stop the promotion, and that's it. You're just down a piece, and also white is getting checkmated very quickly. So after knight to h2, rook to f8 was played, hoping to trade rooks, or maybe somehow get the rook all the way to f1. But Kasparov shows that that will not help Bent in any way. He just played rook to c3, and he was in this position on move 56 that 48 years old Bent Larsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Even though, again, he can bring a queen into the game, it will not help him. If you go e8 queen, just rook c1, and that's it. Once you give up the queen, and then this comes with check, you will also give up the rook, and then this will be checkmate. And if you go rook to f1, hoping that Kasparov captures the rook, and then you just bring the queen into the game, of course, Kasparov will not do that. Kasparov would just play rook e3, stop promotion, and that's it. Once you move the rook, you can either capture, or you can go all in and just go rook e2, and that's it. There's no defense here. Rook b3 check. You're gonna go knight to f3 check, and after king to f1, a nice rook to f2 checkmate, or any other sequence. But yeah, Bent is lost here. So yeah, very strange for Kasparov on missing that tactic. I would be very interesting to know what happened there, and how Kasparov missed such a move. I mean, it's very much unlike him, because I think that's the first move that Kasparov sees. So very, very hard to understand what happened there. And yeah, here, I mean, not all equal positions are equal. King to h2, it's okay. King to g2 loses terribly. Bent went king g2, and that's the story of this game. So yeah, Kasparov continues his brilliant run of the Niksic tournament 1983. Round 7, he defeats the legendary Bent Larsen, and makes sure that he never loses a game to him, as of course people will talk, some 10, 20 years from now. They will say, okay, Fischer completely crushed him, and Kasparov couldn't handle a much older version of Bent. What are we talking about here? So I think, it was a little bit of an extra incentive for Kasparov when facing a legend like Bent Larsen. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it, and a little bit of extra info regarding the players in the game and the tournament. If you haven't seen the Piatigorsky Cup or the Bobby Fischer saga, first links in the description below, do check it out. I would like to thank Alan Charbonneau, Seshadri Subramania, Nick Lin, Paul Hinamund, and Ricardo Cardona Lopez for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot, I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.